Ba-da boop boop ba. Blibbity bitty up up da doo dee da 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 dee da. Ba-ba-doo boop. Ba-da ba-da boom boom ba-ba-dee ba. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. I'm going live. Doo-doo. Gotta share it. Come and join me for my tabletop gaming stream. Boop. Boop. One more for good luck. Boop. You know what, one more just because I'm feeling lucky. On the whatever games. Let me do the hashtags, just like Alex said. RPG. Don't let them steal your joy. Gamer. TTRPG. Volunteer. Board games. We'll rock it. I can see everything from my desk, yeah. Up in the beep bop beep. So glad my desk is clean. I wish the rest of my room was clean. And we will get there soon. I don't know who's, but thank you. Thank you for being a friend. Do 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 do. Boo boo. Baby, Lord Jam. We don't chew gum on stream. Rule number 7. Chewing gum on the stream is bad for the stream. Give me just 2 more minutes, actually a minute and a half, and we are gonna go live. Just waiting so some more of my friends can jump on. And we'll go from there. Nice. Getting ready to go live. Starting soon with the big bad nerd dad. Beep doody doody beep bop beep bop. Where the hood at? We're going live, live, live. Dee 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 doo dee doo doo doo. Ba da da dum dum dum. Dum dum dum. Dum dum dum. Dee dee doo 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 doo. Hey, Gallant Knight Games! Thanks for watching. We're gonna be talking about Tiny Dungeon and Tiny Frontiers. Whoop whoop! Very excited. Alright, 10 seconds. Give me a good old 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sabrina, thank you very much for liking the stream, and Here we are! Yay! We're back. Oh, what a wonderful first quarter it has been. Happy April 1st. I'm not big on April Fools, so we're not going to do any kind of jokes today. But I am very excited to be here and talk about all the cool games that I got to play in the first quarter of 2024. I made it my New Year's resolution to try as many different games as possible. I love Tiny Dungeon. I love Frostgrave. I love Savage Worlds. I like Dungeons and Dragons. So I've played those games. I know those games. I love those games. I recommend those games to lots of people. But this year, I wanted it to be a year of change. I wanted it to be a year of new games for everybody. So I've deep dived into all different types of games. For anybody who's watched the stream on my 24-hour streams, or pretty soon I'll be streaming it with my daughters, I absolutely love Tiny Dungeon. Tiny Dungeon is my go-to game. Fantastic rule set. My 5 and my 3-year-old can play it. I am taking Lulu, my 5-year-old, to a convention in 2 weeks so that she can help me demo this game to new players all day long. And I think that this is the best system to get people into role-playing, not just TTRPGs, but role-playing in general, because it just does a phenomenal job of making the game fun and simple and easy to understand across the board for brand new players of any age. And it really helps break down the barrier of being shy. Like the rules are so simple, and you can just do what you want and try what you want. That's exactly what the Tiny D6 system does. And for one of my games that I tried out this year, hey Alex, thanks for liking the stream. One of the games that I tried out this year within the Tiny Dungeon, the Tiny D6 family, is Tiny Frontiers. This is the Revive 2nd edition. And if Tiny Dungeon is D&D fantasy, then the Tiny Frontiers is the space equivalent. So it's sci-fi. It gives you all kinds of rules for different alien races and family games. Yes, that's exactly what we're here for, Alex. We're here to bring families and people together. A bunch of different types of alien races, sci-fi weaponry. It gives you great rules for chips and all kinds of other stuff. They've got a second part to it that I've got around here somewhere. Whoop. Which is Mecha and Monsters. So this goes along with the Tiny Frontiers. And this lets you play Godzilla and Kong, right? I haven't done this one yet. This one is on the docket for me to try out this year. But I wanted to do Tiny Frontiers first because I love Tiny Dungeons so much that I wanted to try something else within the line. Also because I play Tiny Cthulhu. Whoop. Tiny everything is within arm's reach because I love it so much. I wanna pour into it because it helps people into role-playing games. Gallant Knight Games makes all of these things. Alan Barr specifically. Great man. He sent my girls some care packages when he saw that they were playing Tiny Dungeons, and so they're set for all kinds of tiny supers, tiny taverns, a whole campaign for Tiny Dungeon. I'm very excited to get into that with them because they love playing games. Alex, yes. So Alex is asking about Tiny Frontiers. Tiny Frontiers is like a Star Trek RPG. It keeps Star Trek, Star Wars, Dune, anything you can think that's sci-fi. John Carter of Mars. We're playing it right now with Helldivers. So there's a really famous video game out right now that's on PC and PlayStation called Helldivers 2, and it is phenomenal. I love it. I'm playing it a lot. I don't usually play video games very often. If I do, it's with my family. But me and my buddies have turned Tiny Frontiers into Tiny Helldivers. And last week we all gathered around a table and we're like, all right, cool. Let's make our characters. And we each had a loaded out Helldiver. And played on this barren wasteland with a bunch of space bugs that were attacking people that we were trying to escort from one building to another. And we had a lot of fun, like The flexibility of the Tiny D6 system allows you to almost make up rules on the fly, and so that hey, we're going to do this. We're going to try and save these people. Well, in the video game, bug breaches happen all the time. The space bugs come out, and they just pop up from different locations all the time. So how do we do that? Well, let's just roll a d6 on a 5 or 6, just like with Tiny Dungeons. The Tiny D6 system is, if you roll a 5 or a 6, it's a success. So for the bugs, if they roll a 5 or a 6, they spawn. For Trekkie fans, there is a Star Trek. There is a Star Trek tabletop RPG, but it's very crunchy. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of things that you got to go over, and so it's not great for getting people into tabletop RPGs. And that's what I try and gear myself towards when I'm teaching people how to play games. Is what is the simplest form of a role-playing game, a very, very rules-light system, and that's going to be anything that is Tiny D6. So I highly recommend Tiny Frontiers if you don't like fantasy, if you don't want to try Dungeons and Dragons, but you have your eyes set on something more sci-fi. A good friend of mine, Adam, doesn't want to try any other type of setting for his tabletop role-playing games, and I had asked him for months, for weeks and months. So Adam, there's got to be something that we can do, some other game that we can play other than Dungeons and Dragons, because he loves Dungeons and Dragons, but he didn't want to try and do anything else. And I was like, well, what if we did a sci-fi, like something sci-fi themed? And he was like, I don't know, like Star Wars and Star Trek. I was like, well, think of anything sci-fi. It doesn't have to be that. What about Aliens? Aliens is sci-fi. What if we did something goofy like Spaceballs? And he popped off and said, you know what I really like? I love playing a video game called Destiny 2. Destiny. And there's no Destiny tabletop RPG. Well, that's where Tiny Frontiers comes in. You take the lore and the info that we have for Destiny 2, and it's the very simple rule set to play Destiny 2 on a tabletop. I did the exact same thing for Helldivers. I took the Helldivers setting and lore and information and bloop, dropped the players in. Yeah. Christopher on Facebook says that Spaceballs is Star Wars with comedy, and anything like that would be fantastic, right? We want something that really engages people. We want something that's going to get people to the table and play, but we also want to make sure that we're playing games that people genuinely want to play. There is a plethora of tabletop RPGs out there. It doesn't just have to be fantasy. It doesn't just have to be Dungeons and Dragons. I like Dungeons and Dragons. I love Tiny Dungeons. I love the fantasy aspect of it. And I had gotten a little run down for a while. I bogged, I was tired of playing fantasy. So Tiny Frontiers, there's Tiny Wastelands, Tiny Cthulhu. One of the games I want to talk about in just a few minutes is sort of like an offshoot from that. And so my goal for this year was to try different games. Tiny Frontiers, highly recommend it. You can get the books off of Drive-Thru RPG or the Gallant Knight Games website. See if I can, you know what? Switch camera angles. Exactly why I have this set up. So there's a little logo. Let me see if I can get that. Gallant Knight Games. They actually commented already in my chat. If you go to my Facebook page, I always tag them. They're great people. I love running their games at conventions because it's super simple, super easy. Like I said, when Lulu and I go out in 2 weeks to a convention to show people how to play tabletop RPGs, we will be demoing Tiny Dungeon. Because it's simple, it's fun, it's easy, and it's going to get things done. Bloop. Main screen. So, that's the first one. Tiny Frontiers. Ooh. Chris says, whenever I sit down and take time to write an adventure, I have more fun hearing and taking part in the laughter during the game I run than I do in stroking my own ego with how much story I can drop. All right, so Christopher Lowell over on Facebook, very good friend of mine, a fellow storyteller. I don't consider him a dungeon master. He is very much a storyteller. He's actually run games for us on the stream before for one of our 24-hour streams. Good all-around guy, and he knows what it's about when it comes to telling stories and getting people around the table and allowing them to have the fun that they want to have, allowing them to tell their story instead of just us as a storyteller giving them something to play, right? It's not a video game. They're not in a railroad when you play a tabletop role-playing game. It should be sandbox. They should be allowed to explore and have different options. A couple weeks ago, Lulu did something completely out of the blue and reminded me that she could speak Goblin. Her little character could speak Goblin because she wanted. That's one of the languages that she chose. So she was actually able to talk and negotiate with some goblins that had been threatening a village, and instead of going and beating them up, she realized that the goblins were out of food and they needed a new food source. And so she said, well, let's work together. That's the kind of stories that I want to build on. That's what I want to do with my children, is give them options and let them explore those options. And it should be the same way when we're playing games with other players at the table. We want to sit down and allow them to have those options. We want them to have those opportunities to role play and not just give them a game where they're full head down, just running and gunning, beating up monsters. That's not what tabletop role playing is about. It's a part of it. And as a good guy that I actually sat down with earlier this week, Callum had told me that that's what D&D was originally made for. Chainmail was a war game that D&D just sort of fell into place with a role-playing game. So there's a lot of combat aspects in tabletop role-playing games because of that. Because who doesn't want to slay dragons and mop up goblins and defend their town against zombies, right? That's the heroic portions of it. There's also something very minute and delicate in public relations and talking it out with the king, or conversing with somebody at a fair and negotiating with a market stall. Like this, there's so much to role playing than just combat, which is going to bring me to my next game, which is Vaesen. Vaesen by Free League Press. Vaesen, the first time I ever heard of Vaesen, my good friend Hugh Melrose had mentioned it and said, hey, you should probably check this out. It's a really neat game, and since you want to try out a bunch of different games this year, I highly recommend this one because it's completely different. So I went to Alcon towards the end of February and had a blast. I had an amazing time with some great people. I demoed a lot of Tiny Dungeon, and unfortunately my girls weren't feeling too good for the second day, so I came back home and took care of them. But got a chance to play some Tiny Cthulhu. But the Friday night of the convention, I was actually able to play in a game. I was running all the other games. Like I was able to play in a game of Vaesen, and this is Nordic horror role-playing. In other words, this is not set in high fantasy land. This isn't in Middle Earth. This isn't in Faerun. This isn't in some other sort of fantasy place. This was taking place in Sweden and Norway. What is this? Northern Europe is what it is. What it says, in the 19th century, and you play as like village doctors, or my character was a schoolmarm. And it's just very, very different from playing a knight in shining armor, or a wizard, or a rogue. Chris over on Facebook says that this looks very Van Helsing, and it is. The entire idea about this, Vaesen is Scandinavian, Swedish. Vaesen is Swedish for spirit. So the spirits of the earth are stirring, and it's up to you to figure out why. The spirits are neither good nor bad. They're simply just reacting to their environment. So one of the things that I was reading was, you could be settling something for the spirit. You walk into a town and you notice that their crops are failing, and the children are getting sick, and people are disappearing, and nobody can figure it out. Nobody can figure out why. So it's your job as a person with the sight that can see spirits to figure it out, to be like, something's going on here, and we need to figure out why the crops are failing, why the children are getting sick. And it could be a myriad of things, a bunch of different little spirits that are taking a hold of the village, or it could be one giant specter that is angry because the village stopped performing the sacred spring rituals of rebirth and life, or it could be that they're not rotating their crops properly, so the land isn't being tended correctly, and so the land's angry and it's not yielding anything, and because of that, it's making the children sick. And so it was very in depth, and we went through the entire thing with absolutely no combat. There was no combat in this game. There was one opportunity for us to have combat, and instead of having combat, one of the other players tackled the person that was going to engage in combat and was like, "Wait, we can talk our way out of this. We can figure something out." And I genuinely liked that idea, that we spent the entire time investigating. We spent the entire time conversing with town folk, and then towards the end, even with some of the Vasen themselves. Chris over on Facebook says, some of the best heroes are those who are common, everyday grinders, who see something happening and make the decision to be a hero. It makes for a gritty, dirty do-gooder. Dresden Files is very much like that. And I absolutely agree. I think that it's more engaging to not have knights in shining armor. It's more engaging to have, like, the local butcher, for some reason, can communicate with the dead, or whatever the thing may be. And so you have, in our game, there was a priest, there was a writer, there was a ex-military hunter, so he was just a huntsman. There was a military officer. There was a librarian. I played a midwife / schoolmarm, and it was just a very role-play centric experience that I haven't had in years, where there wasn't combat. And they walked into a bar. All these characters just sort of met on a train going to the town. I forget what the name of the town was, but I highly recommend Vasen. If you want to try something that's completely different, if you want to try something that is more emotional than combat driven, there's a lot of role playing in here, and it takes place on Earth, our Earth, in the 1900s, Europe. There's even there's an add-on for it that takes place in Ireland and England. So that was kind of neat. This takes place more in, like, Scandinavia, Swedish, yeah. And very simple system to use. It uses the Year Zero system, which Free League Press has reign over and deals out to whatever they want. This actually takes place. Ours took place in between the wars, so it took place in between World War I and World War II, and so it gives you this really nice, like, vibe. And because you're the game master, you can say when it takes place, but it's supposed to be during the Industrial Revolution. So, like, industry is encroaching on the land, and that's why a lot of the spirits are restless, because of they're losing the old ways, and it gives you that opportunity to play something that's Cthulhu-esque without being Cthulhu, like cosmic horror. These are spirits of the world, which I'm going to talk about another game that I'm doing this month with that almost the exact same theme. I do not have a book for the other RPG that I played. I count Vasen as my February game. Tiny Frontiers was my March game. Remember, I'm trying to do a new game every month. And then for my January game, I played Valen Antil 1. Valen Antil 1 is a game made by a local game developer, Shane Jensen, from the Brawl. That's the Board Game, Roleplay, and Wargaming League, right here in Houston, Texas. And he came up with this amazing... Oh, Chris asked, where can you find Vasen? Vasen can be found, just like a lot of other RPGs, on DriveThruRPG. Against the Free League Press, if you want to go straight to their website and grab it from them. My local store, Eden Games and Hobbies, I believe has some copies of it. If not, they're going to get some more. But it's a fantastic game. But back to Valen Antil 1. Valen Antil 1 is a really neat streaming game, a scaling game. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for liking. That's my friend. Valinantal 1 has this amazing scaling ability. So we started out in a role-playing game, and you don't get to choose how you make your character. You literally roll dice, and on a chart, you create a random character. And so from there, you decide, okay, well, I don't have great dexterity, but I do have good strength, or I'm not very strong, but I'm extremely intelligent. So you sort of figure out how to build the character from what your roles are. I did not have a good fighter. My character that I rolled was horrible at fighting and horrible at speaking, but he was very intelligent. And so I was like, well, I'm going to make him more of like the captain of the team. So I started taking special abilities within the character creation for doing tactics. So I could call out and be like, hey, that monster has a squishy underbelly. If you hit it there, you'll get a bonus to hit. And so when my character would say things like that, the other characters would get extra dice to hit the monster, or the monster would get less dice on their defense. It was a little crunchy for my taste. There was a lot of dice rolling and a lot of numbers to factor in, but this was also a game that was in beta. So we were helping playtest this game for my friend Shane, and I had a lot of fun, especially when he explained to me that the game scales up. So we were playing the RPG version of it, and we actually ran it using one of the epic encounters from Steamforged Games. Everything you need to run a session is inside this box. Miniatures, the scenario, what to do when players do certain things. These are fantastic. I'll talk about that again on another date. But he ran it using that for our RPG. And then once we finished the RPG portion of it, he explained to us, now you have angered a horde of goblins. And these goblins are going to go back to their village war chief and say, hey, the humans are encroaching on our land, and they're going to come at you in waves. So now you switch from a role-playing game to a small-scale skirmish game, where you and maybe a couple of town guards and the rest of the players go out and you're trying to fend off these goblins. And maybe, let's say you fend them off and you beat back the goblin menace, but one gets away and he goes back and says, hey, they're stronger than we thought. We're going to need the full might of the mountain. And now an entire mountain full of goblins, a huge army comes out, and the game scales up again to large-scale warfare. And it uses the exact same rules for if you're fighting or doing skill checks in a tabletop RPG, to doing skill checks and combat in a skirmish style, to the all-out full war where it is large and crazy and there's hundreds of models on the field, and you are more like a lieutenant, or you are more like a general along with the other players, and be like, all right, I'm taking this regiment and we're going to go this way, and I'm taking this regiment and I'm going to go this way. Well, look out, they have spider riders back there, or it looks like they have some sort of war machines, war engines in the back there, so be careful and keep yourself covered or in a good position. So you're still using the tactics. You're still using, like, my character is not a fighter, so I have to be prepared to be like, oh, we have to be careful making maneuvers around this direction because they have a fire arrow regiment coming from the back over here. And it was very neat and very detailed, and not like anything that I've ever played before. And I don't know if I'll ever play anything like that ever again. But I do know that I am going to play Valinantal 1 again. My friend Shane is doing a fantastic job beta testing it and coming up with more ideas and really driving the playability of the game home every single time he runs it. I'm in his Discord where I get to see him changing things and asking us questions, getting feedback, because it's not just a game that he wants to produce, it's a game that he wants to see grow and continue to go out. So he's getting a lot of feedback from a lot of people. He's been working on it for several years now, and this was the first time that I had been in one of his games where to beta test it. So Valinantal 1 is a game to look out for. I'm sure it's going to be out on Drive-Thru-RPG within the year. He's still getting art done for the book and getting the book formatted. So I know that that'll come out fairly soon within the next few months. So that was Valinantal 1. I say that was my January pick. Tiny Frontiers, and Vaesen. So that's the first 3 months of the year. My first quarter is done. I've played a brand new game every single month. I've learned a brand new game every single month. Um, and I'm grateful for the experience because I feel like it's broadening my horizons in role-playing games. So now when people ask me, I want to try something different. I want to be hey, Aunt Nani. My Aunt Melanie came into the chat. When they ask me if I want to play a different game, if I want to do something cool, this gives me the opportunity to say, hey, there's more than just Dungeons and Dragons out there. There's more than just Pathfinder or Starfinder or the big name games, Savage Worlds. I love Savage Worlds. But there's other games out there that allow you to play in these different scenarios and settings. So I talked about Vaesen and how it had to deal with the spirits of the earth, and I thought it was very interesting, very funny that we didn't have to do a lot of combat, almost no combat. Well, the game that I've chosen for April is the Old Gods of Appalachia. This is actually a really, really good podcast. If you have a chance to listen to it, I've listened to a few episodes, 3 episodes. Just picked them out from different seasons. They're currently in their 4th season, and they're wonderful. Really well done audio dramas. It is not a live play of the role-playing game. The role-playing game came after the Old Gods of Appalachia, and this takes place in the United States in the 1900s, 2000. What is it? Basically the 1920s and the 1930s. It takes place in the 1920s and 1930s in the Appalachia area. So North Carolina, Tennessee, or Virginia, all the way up through the mountains. I'm concentrating on Tennessee and Virginia right now because a friend of mine asked me to run this game, and I had never heard anything about it. I don't know anything about the cipher system. The cipher system is the rule set that you use to run this. But it got me very, very interested because it has to deal a lot with folklore, the mountain folklore. So it's very much cosmic horror, natural horror, things that are outside of our field of vision. And like the haunting darkness that's within the woods that we forget about, that's there. And so I sat down a few days ago with my friend Callum, and we started charting out, all right, so where do we want to play this? So we look, there's this huge map. Huge map. Let me see if I can get this out without ripping it. Of the Appalachian Mountains. I think you can fold that one. Wow. Huge map. That gives you all the land, all the different states and territories. Hey Noah, thank you very much for liking the stream. I greatly appreciate it. Every like, every comment, every share really helps me get out to more people so they can see all the different games that are available. And then they can ask me questions because I love to help. But the Old Gods of Appalachia has, again, it's almost like a classless system. So you pick a type. You can be a type of character in this game. What do they call them? Intuitive, concept-driven character generation system that gives you limitless options. So there's a protector type, there's a investigator, explorer type, there is a mystic type, and then there's like the face type, the talker, the smooth, your front man, the guy who makes who has the connections and things like that. And it's supposed to play out along the same time period as the Roaring Twenties, Prohibition, things like that. So you can have bootleggers, you can have rail wars, right? The train rails going through the mountains and trying to get coal and wood to all these different places. And while you're doing all of that city world building, there's the mystic side of it that you don't think about Bigfoot in the woods, the Mothman. What did they call them? The Moon-Eyed People. The Moon-Eyed People are something that I had heard from. Oh, thank you, Aunt Nani. Thank you, Andrew, for liking the stream. The Moon-Eyed People are something that I have heard about in real life. A friend of mine at work, Randy, lived in Georgia his entire life and talked about these people that lived in the mountain woods that never came out during the day, and they had silver hair and very pale skin. We would think that they look like albinos, but they're not, and you don't want to engage them because they're almost ethereal in nature, and so it's folklore, but it's things that people still talk about today, which I found engrossing. Like I eat that up. I want to learn about local folklore, about the local legends that people have forgotten, because that's a storyteller's bread and butter. Those are the things that can pull the heartstrings of people that you remember. As a young kid, my family talked about the chupacabra all the time. So that's a South Texas thing, where there's a monster that eats goats, something like a vampire, but it's a little different. And so there are things like that. There are local legends, folklore for all the different regions of the United States, and for there to be a role-playing game geared towards that for the Northeast is just right up there, right? Because I love Call of Cthulhu. I love playing Tiny Cthulhu with my friends. I've done the Tiny Cthulhu campaign that right here in Houston and Galveston, because the 1920s was a fantastic time of industrialization for the Houston Ship Channel. In 1921, the Houston Zoo was actually called the Houston Zoological Gardens, and so there was all different kinds of stuff. Like there was the Rice University was here, the Rice Institute was here. There are still buildings that were built then that are still standing now in Houston. Like all of this history, all of this lore that actually happened, you can funnel into a game. Paradise, Tennessee / Virginia, there is a border town called Paradise that actually exists. And I was looking at it and I was like, man, this is exactly what I want to play. This is something exactly that has to deal with real history, real folklore, that I can produce something from. And they say it in the book and they say it on their podcast. Anytime you play the RPG, you are creating an alternate timeline for their podcasts. So you can write in and tell them about what some of your characters did and what they discovered and what's in the woods, what's in the mountains, and they might work it in. Their podcast has a Patreon where you can put down different Patreon levels and have a character in there or give story ideas. And I thought that was really neat because that keeps the world living, that keeps the world changing and evolving, and it gives you the opportunity to produce some fiction for yourself, which is what I really think that this year is going to be about for me. I really, really like the idea of writing. I really, really like the idea of creating. It's been about 4 years since I've had an opportunity to do that for myself, and 2024 is going to be the year that I continue my work on my own personal RPG, my own personal setting, and finish the things that I set out to do in 2020. They kind of got hammed up by the pandemic and life, because right now we are in an era of joy. We are in an era of changing our stars and of moving forward. So I'm very excited about that and about all the things that are going to come down the pipeline along with that. So we've talked about all my different games. We talked about the one that I'm working on this month. Next week I'll be coming back to it. If you've watched the stream this far, I have a giveaway. If you would share my stream right now or at the end, whenever you get a chance, I am making dice jars. If you can see that. Each dice jar is going to have a custom set of dice and a RPG sticker. This one says, "Do not meddle in the affairs of dragons, for you are crunchy and taste good with ketchup." But I am making these little dice jars to give away when I go out and do demonstrations of how to play the different games. When Lulu and I go out, we have dozens and dozens of these little jars that I am going to give away so that new players have something to do. I have tons and tons of dice tiny dungeon that I'm just going to give away to players so that they have something when they walk away, so that they take something away and maybe excites them even more. But if you will like and share the stream right now, or when the stream's finished, I'll put you into a contest to win one of these, and I will, if I can't hand deliver it, or depending on where you're at, Castillo Choco, I know that you're in South America, and I cannot walk over there. But I will send some dice to you, along with some of these coupons, some of these stickers, and I am getting special branded Big Bad Nerd Dad, boop, 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 boop. Big Bad Nerd Dad stickers that I'm very excited about, thanks to my sponsors, the Aegis Creative Company. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for watching the stream. I've had a really great time talking about all these different RPGs that I've gotten into, all the new RPG that I'm going to get into this month. Next week, on Monday, I'll be assembling some more Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures, and then painting those later in the month. I'll also be painting some of the Epic Encounters boxes that I was gifted, me and the girls were gifted, so that we can have those ready for my demonstrations later this month on the 27th at the Disability Comic-Con in West Houston. So if you watched, thank you very much. I love you and really appreciate you watching, liking, sharing, commenting. Every little bit helps. So have a great night. I love you, and remember that hope endures.